guys, it's Heathland. You won't find any other posts on my channel about heathlands, well, not as yet. But I thought I'd bring you out here, because this is August, this is mid-August. Early August would probably have been better, but it's absolutely beautiful at the moment. It's a nice warm day, not too much breeze, and you can see the whole place is purple with flowering heather. So what I'm going to do now is shoot a couple of videos and explain a bit about Heathland, about its ecology and how it fits into biodiversity in general and the ecology of the British landscape as much as I can in bits, so hopefully some people will find it interesting and it will get them to do things like ask questions and form their own decisions. I'm going to give you the best information that I can, because that's kind of what I do. Anyway, this is Lowland Heath. It's different from moorland, although they are both dwarf shrub communities characterised by heathers or heaths, to give them the slightly older term. And as you can see as we sort of pan around, this bit here, which is Winfrith Heath, is one of the bigger bits of the remaining heathland in southern Britain, of which we have lost possibly 90%. Of the small percentage we have remaining, a lot of it is in poor condition, heavily scrubbed. If trees come in, you lose a lot of the open character of this, which some people might suggest gives you more biodiversity, but actually in the short term it doesn't. And in the long term you lose the component that this habitat gives you to the landscape as a whole. So let's talk a bit about heather. We've got 3 species of heather commonly in the UK. The most common, as we go into my shadow, is this species here. Which is ling, and that's just general heather, Calluna vulgaris, and that basically grows on very poor acid soils where it can compete on favourable terms in comparison with other more quickly growing species which need more nutrients. It's a dwarf shrub, same family as rhododendrons, and it can live 30-40 years or more, but it can live longer if it's burnt or cut or grazed, forcing it to regenerate, same as if it was a tree. Right, the next species, this is mainly a patch of ling, but there's also cross-leaved heath, which is this jobby here. If I pick a bit and we look at it closely, because we need to look at the other species closely as well. You can see it's got these beautiful little closed, almost tubular flowers, and if you look up at the stem, you'll see that it has whorls of leaves which form a cross shape. Usually there's 4, sometimes there's 5, and they show better where the stem has grown quickly. You can see it here. So whorls of 4 leaves, this one's gone over. You can see the stigmas, female parts of the plant protruding. And like ling, like the 3rd species, bell heather, it's an extremely good nectar source. This one, cross-leaved heath, likes wet conditions. So I'm going to go for a bit of a wander now and find some dry conditions where we will find bell heather. If we look around here, we can see this is fairly flat, and on the surface you've got a thin layer of peat which has built up over many years, which tends to retain moisture. Here's a bit that's been kicked up by the cattle that graze the site. And you see that when it rains, the mosses and the lichens like this one, and the peat itself, which is mainly heather, plus bits of grass and whatnot, retains moisture and gives it a different character to dry heath. Right, let's go for a wander, because I'm going over there, look. Hear the sound? The whole place is alive with bees, honeybees, also bumblebees and flies and various other things like hoverflies. They're flying around nectaring. This is ling. And right next to it, so you can tell the difference, is bell heather. And this is a cross-leaved heath. And see how similar it is to the bell heather? But if I pick a tiny bit of bell heather, let's have this bit. But you can see the whorls of the leaves. They're in almost like sub-whorls. So instead of having 4 individual leaves around the stem, it's got little clusters of leaves. Hang on, we're working on one hand here. Let's juggle these so we can hold them side by side. Right, cross-leaved heath on the bottom and bell heather on the top. And it's kind of called bell heather. If I do that, it almost rings. So 3 species in close proximity, because the cross-leaved heath was up there. But here on this slope there's more drainage. Bell heather likes dry conditions. You can get a mosaic. I'll talk a lot about mosaics on Heathland, where you've got bell heather next to cross-leaved heath. So you've got dry heath, dry conditions, next door to wet conditions. So on a small scale, you've got a lot of variation, and it's variation which is the spice of life. And the more variation you have, the more niches you have the species can exploit, and the more biodiversity you have overall. If you look at the difference between up there and down here, you've got the heathland is much longer. Basically this slope isn't grazed as hard as the top slope, which is almost flat, easier for cattle to get to, and this site is grazed by cattle with occasional sheep, and there are deer around as well. But different species will exploit this and that together, and this makes the habitat more diverse. Now further down, you see where the heather finishes, you've got wetter conditions and the heath is more grassy. In fact, I think we've got a seep line along there, and we'll go down and look at that now. And I think I can see bog asphodel there, which is another plant that indicates even wetter conditions. Let's go and have a look at that. And I think we'll go around here, then turn left. I'll start walking, and we'll see what we can see. There's quite a lot of bracken here, but see how sparse it is? Because it's struggling, which is kind of good. But over there, see the green? That's bracken. That's a clone of bracken, because all these are probably a clone as well. It spreads by rhizomes. Bracken is doing a lot better, and it can be invasive. As we walk down here, we go through a fairly abrupt change. Suddenly we lose the heather, and we get into a band that's more grassy. And down here we have this plant, which is bog asphodel. And these are beautiful. Member of the lily family, specialises in really wet habitat. Hear that? So even in August, driest time of the year, we've got a bit of a spring line here, a bit of a seep, and this is why this thing's growing here. And this is the seed heads. The flowers are beautiful bright yellow, and you can see them all through here, orange. So back in June, it's sort of an absolute picture. Now we've also got a bit more diversity here. We've got a wetter patch, which has probably been scuffed up by the cattle. This is a cow hoof print. You can see the water in the bottom of that. And in between, where the vegetation is basically a crust on the surface of the soil, the surface of the peat, you've got this plant, which is sundew. It's one of 3 species in the British Isles, and they're all insectivorous. Have a quick span around, wondering if we can find any with an actual insect on it. These are insectivorous. They managed to survive in really poor conditions, really wet conditions, which causes physiological drought, even when there's plenty of water, because it's cold. Because they can cope with those conditions where other plants can't. Because they use the resources on the insects they capture with these little blobs of sticky substance on their leaves. If we pan over here, see, this looks a little bit like an iris done in miniature. This is bog asphodel, and then we've got this lovely lichen, which is really, really stiff, but when it rains it goes flexible. Then we've got this, which is either a rush or a sedge. My botany is terribly rusty. And then more lichen, which also retains water before it dries out. And mosses, and there's sphagnum moss on this slope. And you can see this is last year's bog asphodel. Seed heads have remained. So you've got a lot of small scale diversity as well as large scale diversity. And there's more sundews. We'll finish this little clip on this one.